I'm Wendy Zuckerman, and this is Science Versus.
Thank you.
Before we get into today's episode, I just want to say that getting advertising from various companies about AI products, but we are going to be rethinking our policy on all of this. For those who have been writing to us, we are reading your comments. We totally hear you. We have to take a lot into account to try to keep this show going, and there are some balances we need to strike, but sometimes we make the wrong call. So I just wanted to say, in touch, and now on with the show. Recently, the Trump administration has been rolling back protections that are designed to keep the air clean in the US. And he's been making it easier for certain industries to pump potentially dangerous chemicals into the air.
They want to make pollution great again.
So in case you don't know, the EPA just announced that they're doing massive deregulation.
It means pollutants from cars, trucks and power plants will no longer be regulated at the federal level.
We canceled the EPA's totally absurd tailpipe emission standards, which was a disaster.
Trump says that he's doing this to save money for the automotive and fossil fuel industry and to make cars cheaper for consumers. And since he's said that climate change is a scam, he's obviously not worrying about that, unlike us. But the thing is, even away from climate change, these changes that he's making, it made us at Science Versus want to go back to an episode that we published several years ago. It's one that I find myself thinking about a lot these days. And I won't say too much more about it. I've probably said too much already, except that this story unfolds as a medical mystery. So let's just jump in. To tell us about it is Rosamond Adu-Kissy-Debrah. She's a former teacher in London.
One second. This is my daughter. Let's see what she is. Hi, Babs. Can you get what?
Chocolate cereal.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, thanks.
See-
Bye. Love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Rosamond is a single mum, and just as we got on the call, one of her twins phoned. It was about her birthday. What does she want?
For one day in the year, I allow them to have chocolate cereal.
Oh, she wanted chocolate cereal.
Of course, she makes me sound like such a strict mum. Oh, Lord. She did say I love you at the end, so see, I'm doing good.
But our story today isn't about the twins or chocolate cereal. It's about Rosamond and her oldest daughter, Ella. She was the big sister to those twins. She had big brown eyes and often wore her hair in braids. Rosamond told us that she loved to swim and bike, and she was super competitive.
Like she would play chess, collect balls, so she was into board games. She was into beating people, like luring you people in, pretending that, like a chess game was equal. That when you got comfortable, bang, 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 checkmate. Mom, would you like to play chess? No, thank you very much, Ella. I don't want to play chess with you.
So, Ella was smart. At 9 years old, she was picking up Jane Eyre. And just the other day, Rosamond found this book that Ella had been reading. It was called The Observer Book of Genius.
So who did Ella compare herself to? I thought, let me have a look in there. Plato, she would. Pythagoras. So she had a great sense of humour.
But a few years before all this, Ella's life had taken a turn. It started in October 2010, when she was 6 years old. Ella and her mum had gone to visit the Monument to the Great Fire of London. It's this tall tower, and to get to the top, you have to walk up more than 300 steps. So together, they were climbing this tall tower. But weirdly, Ella was struggling. She'd been a little sick, had a bit of a cough.
And when she was climbing up the stairs, she said, I can't climb up the stairs. And then I remember, typical mum, I said, you've only got a cold. Little did I know, it was the beginning of the end.
That night on the way home, Ella fell asleep on the train, which was also strange. And from there, things got bad quickly. that little cough that Ella had turned into these terrible coughing fits that seemed to come out of nowhere. Sometimes she'd cough so hard that she couldn't breathe.
What used to happen is she used to get so much mucus, her lungs would collapse and she would stop breathing. So we had to resuscitate her to live.
And because oxygen wasn't getting into her brain, sometimes she'd have a seizure and even pass out.
And by Christmas time, she had been admitted to ICU for the first time. She was admitted to hospital 28 times.
28 times?
Yes. Yes. So she had hundreds of attacks.
And the scariest part of this was that Rosamond didn't know why any of this was happening. How did her kid go from being perfectly healthy to being in the ICU in just a couple of months? Ella would go to some of the best doctors in London, many different hospitals, and yet no one could tell them what was going on. After the break, the story of Ella's medical mystery and how it made the invisible visible.
A safer Ontario means more police and prosecutors making sure my car doesn't get stolen.
It means building new jails to keep criminals behind bars.
And it means there's no need to worry when I play at the park.
We're making every corner of Ontario safer to make all of Ontario safer. That's how we protect Ontario.
For all of us.
Learn how at ontario.ca/saferontario, paid for by the Government of Ontario.
The Mattamy Homes Bike for Brain Health supporting Baycrest returns on May 31st for its 5th anniversary with a new start and finish at the Aga Khan Museum. Join thousands of cyclists as we take over the DVP and Gardner Expressway in support of dementia research and brain health. Riders of all abilities are welcome, and both regular bikes and e-bikes can participate. Bring your friends, family, or corporate team and make an impact. Register today at bikeforbrainhealth.ca.
Welcome back. Where we left off, Ella, who had been this really healthy little kid, was now in and out of hospital, and her mum was desperate to figure out what was making her sick. What did doctors tell you, when you were going into hospital?
We didn't know. We were testing her for loads of things. Epilepsy, cystic fibrosis, loads of things we were testing her for.
Doctors were confused because her symptoms were kind of all over the place. Like, Ella's lungs were producing way too much mucus, which made it harder and harder for her to breathe. And that kind of thing can happen in people with cystic fibrosis. So they tested her for that, but it came back negative. Doctors also tested her for epilepsy because of the seizures, but that didn't pan out either. After tons of blood tests, EEGs, and doctor's appointments, Ella finally got a diagnosis. They told her she had asthma, but that was weird too.
Because she didn't present herself like a normal asthmatic.
Like one of the best medications that we use for asthma, steroids. It didn't work for Ella. And then there was her cough. It was just something weird about it.
Well, you know what? I would recognize Ella's cough anywhere. If you get 1,000 coughs, I could still pick out her cough.
The medical name for a cough like Ella's, where you cough until you pass out, is called cough syncope. And one day, while Ella was getting one of her many tests, Rosamond started Googling it.
I was looking it up in hospital, and the research, because I'm a bit obsessed with research in my job as a teacher, the research at the time when it came to coughing syncope showed me there were mainly men in their 50s and they'd been long distance lorry drivers. And I remember looking at the time going, they are men in their 50s, she's 9, I've never smoked, don't get the connection. And I remember showing it to the doctor and didn't get the connection. It wasn't a thing that a child got, so it didn't make sense she had it.
Yeah, most of the people with cough syncope are middle-aged men who've been smoking for years. It rarely happens to kids. One of Ella's doctors said that her case was so odd that they wanted to write about it in a medical journal, which Ella was actually kind of excited about. And Ella would go on to be written up in many medical journals, making international news and helping perhaps thousands of people breathe easier. But in the middle of all this, Rosamund and Ella didn't know any of that. And then there was this one final but really important mystery here. If this truly was asthma, then what was triggering it? For most asthmatics, you get an attack because it's triggered by something. Cigarette smoke, mold, cleaning products. That stuff gets in your lungs and causes this huge inflammatory reaction, and then your airways constrict. The doctors tested Ella for all kinds of stuff, and none of those triggers made sense.
A safer Ontario means more police and prosecutors making sure my car doesn't get stolen.
It means building new jails to keep criminals behind bars.
And it means there's no need to worry when I play at the park.
We're making every corner of Ontario safer to make all of Ontario safer. That's how we protect Ontario.
For all of us.
Learn how at ontario.ca/saferontario, paid for by the Government of Ontario.
What's up, y'all? I'm Skylar Diggins, 7-time WNBA All-Star, Olympic gold medalist, and mom.
And I'm Cassidy Hubbard, host and reporter for nearly 20 years, covering the biggest names and stories in sports, and mom.
And this is And Mom, a community for athletes, game changers, and moms of all kinds. Dropping May 14th. Tap in with us.
This is Unexplainable. I am Greg Pinkerton. And today we have an episode from a show called Are We Doomed? The show is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Every episode, the host, Ben Bradford, digs into a potentially terrible doomsday scenario. And the thing about terrible doomsday scenarios is that they are really fun to make up stories about, right? We have lots of great TV and movies and books telling us what the various ends of the world might look like. But I have always personally been curious about what we actually know about how doomsday scenarios might play out. What's hype, what is real, what we don't know for sure. And what I appreciate about Are We Doomed is that even though we will never know exactly what the end of the world as we know it will look like, Ben speaks to various researchers who are trying to figure things out. And so here is Ben Bradford and one potentially terrible doomsday scenario.
You realize you're hearing air raid sirens. Your phone, which is on silent, suddenly blares. It's an emergency alert. Nuclear missiles inbound. This is not a test. This is not a test. You stare until a text from a friend jolts you into action. If we follow the roadmap of countless TV shows, novels, video games, what we do next is clear. We scurry down a ladder and clamp the hatch on a fallout shelter. Maybe ramshackle, maybe decked out. We hunker in a gloomy underground, peeling open cans of food, maybe for months, maybe for years, waiting.
To come up to the surface one day and restart civilization.
When we do reemerge, we join a sandy wasteland of sheet metal and cannibals.
This is Thunderdome. Death is listening.
It's not great, but at least it's exciting. I love post-apocalypse movies. Mad Max, The Road, Snowpiercer, the Waterworld live show, really good. I think there's something entrancing about a future wasteland. It's like a blank slate for a filmmaker to create a new world, but with little Easter eggs for us. A character has a spy class, and we know these depictions, though, if you ask, especially studiers of nuclear war and fallout, are not exactly realistic. And I have a question. We've known since our first episode how easy it could be to start nuclear war. Oopsie. If the missiles do launch, if the air raid sirens really do go off, then what? There are bunkers and fallout shelters. Do they work? Who would go into them? how long might one actually be down there? If you survived, what world would you actually walk back into?
Dying times here.
Not that one. I think a really common answer is, well, I'll just be dead, so I don't have to worry about it. If you're in that camp, I got some rough news. In an actual nuclear scenario, the best estimates are that while a horrific, unfathomable number of people die, a lot remain alive. And then,
given the option in human history, most people choose live.
So today, you and me, we're gonna survive nuclear war. From finding shelter to figuring out what our post-nuclear world really looks like. It will be deeply unpleasant, and not in a Mad Max way.
A really terrible toilet. The worst toilet of your entire life.
This is Are We Doomed? A production of Nuanced Tales, part of the NPR network. I'm post-apocalyptic Ben Bradford. Rewind to where all this started. The air raid sirens screech. Our phones blare with emergency alerts. Missiles are inbound. This time, it's not a Hollywood movie. So if we're gonna survive, it's not initially about pluck. It's about location.
Where are you located?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that I'm dead, but we can discuss it.
This is Alex Wellerstein, nuclear weapons historian, author, developer of a detailed Oregon Trail-like video game on the subject of survival and what it would be like. Alex says, in all-out global nuclear war, every major city is a prime target.
I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but like New York City, our assumption is that New York City is glassified.
Cheery. But Alex says, I am not necessarily dead, nor are you, even if you're a New Yorker.
Even the most sort of destructive assumptions of the Cold War, where we assumed the Soviet Union was just trying to just take out Americans, essentially. It still concluded that you could have 40% surviving or something like that. That's not nobody.
That is not nobody. So Alex thinks it's a mistake to assume we wouldn't survive the blast.
Depending on where you're living, depending on where the weapon's targeted, depending on where it goes off, you might be hopeless. But Los Angeles is large, as you know. If the bomb actually lands on you, you're toast. But they can miss. If it lands 5-10 miles in the other direction, you might not be fully toasted. You might be just a little, warmed.
We'd like to avoid being warmed. Alex says that means shielding ourselves from the 3 deadly presents a nuclear weapon brings.
There's going to be heat, there's going to be blast, there's going to be radiation.
The heat reaches the temperature of the sun. The blast crushes concrete buildings like walnuts, and the radiation melts our DNA. If we're outside the zone of certain death, but inside the reach of any of these 3 presents, we're going to need shelter. But where? In the early days of atomic weapons, people worried about bombs equivalent to those the US dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They dug conventional bomb shelters. Radiation, Alex says, was the smallest concern.
If you're close enough that the radiation is going to affect you, the blast and the fire are probably a bigger deal anyway.
But countries continued to build new bombs, bigger bombs, missiles.
The weapons are now hundreds of times bigger, can be even thousands of times bigger. But the new effect is going to be fallout.
Clouds of radiation would now sweep far from a blast site.
And this is caused by the immense amount of radioactive contamination that these weapons have. It's going to affect the suburbs, it's going to affect agriculture. And so the idea is that doesn't happen instantly. That will take several hours for that radiation to make its way across. And so you have this window of time in which you can maybe do something about it.
So more people dug deeper, even farther from the projected blast sites. They didn't just look to shield from potential blasts. They looked to seal themselves away from radiation.
So this is what gets us to the fallout shelter.
The fallout shelter. In the early 1960s, Life magazine gushed on its cover. 97 out of 100 people can be saved with fallout shelters. That was wildly optimistic. President John F. Kennedy called for more than $200 million to build public shelters, equivalent to almost $2.5 billion today.
The United States government had the option to build lots of public shelters.
But that's not what we ended up with.
Because it's really expensive.
It's hard to get that to pencil out.
Yeah, right.
Even $200 million could have only housed a tiny fraction of the populace.
Presidents looked at this and said, I would rather spend that money on something else, like the interstate highway system.
So Alex says the government's message and strategy shifted.
So what they do is what we always do in the United States when we have a public health problem but we don't want to fund it, which is that we encourage you to take responsibility for your own health, and we do that by just telling you you should just build your own shelter. We're not going to do it.
It's of course your job to protect your family from global thermonuclear war.
It's your job.
For a hot minute, the backyard fallout shelter was big business.
There's for-profit enterprises that will sell you prefab shelters. There's a whole little shelter industry.
Save your family from deadly nuclear fallout.
You can picture the result: the hole in the ground in the backyard, ladder leading into the murk, canned food on green metal shelves, a studio apartment for the apocalypse. People did dig these, and still do. But Alex says there were never that many.
In general, it's a pretty small number of people who actually build a shelter. It's really hard to do. It's expensive, and it's coming out of your pocket.
There was other digging. The government may not have chosen to house all its citizens, but it has created some bunkers.
These are real purpose-built shelters.
Alex has visited one in Massachusetts.
It's outside the borders of what they think destroyed Boston would be.
Half an hour from the city, the State Emergency Management Agency uses this bunker as its current headquarters.
It takes you underground. It's got a big door and everything.
These are the real Michelin star bunkers, the country clubs of anti-radioactivity.
They have all sorts of facilities. They have a morgue.
But they're also very exclusive.
They're designated for different parts of the government to basically be whisked away to, so that they can do what's called continuity of government. So the idea is that they'll survive and somehow run the country from down underneath a destroyed mountain.
Your best bet to get in is to be like the Undersecretary of Education. It didn't have to be this way. We could have dug ourselves large public shelters. Other countries did. Switzerland still assigns every citizen a spot in a public fallout shelter. Finland and Sweden created some real first-class facilities with gyms, classrooms, ball courts. Even the U.S.'s great Cold War rival dug far more than we did.
The Soviet Union, they did more state-run projects, big schools, right? That's kind of their jam.
But Alex says there were legitimate reasons to not do this kind of building. The Soviets could probably only have housed about 20% of their enormous population.
It's not clear that even they thought that was going to be very effective.
Yeah.
It's too expensive to build an extra city for all of your people.
Not only are you digging a new city under your current city, you have to stock that unused city with food and water for its theoretical inhabitants. It's a lot. This all matters, not as some dusty history lesson. It matters for us today, as we escape from the missiles, scrambling for shelter in the aftermath. We need to figure out where to go. With few backyard shelters or expensive public bunkers, lawmakers did provide one other option. If we weren't going to build new structures, we would at least recycle.
They start a program to identify spaces that could be used as shelters, existing spaces.
In the 1960s, military surveyors hunted for places we'd already built or dug, rooms that, with minor adjustments and the right supplies, could stand in to provide some protection from radiation.
Some underground basement that was identified by a survey as this meets the minimum requirements for what a fallout shelter would be. It's made out of this, it's got this many stories above it, it's got this and that.
Cities and towns prepared
stuff, and none of those triggers made sense. And the thing is, Ella didn't always have attacks. They'd come in clusters, but when she was feeling okay, Rosamund would try hard to keep things normal. Ella loved listening to music, so they'd put on her favorite songs and dance around to them. Rosamund remembers this one song she loved by Justin Timberlake and Jay-Z. It had just come out. This was early 2013. It's called Suit and Tie.
See, I can see her dancing And girls used to like jump on the sofas. You know how Justin used to jump. And I'm like, Mama, don't break your neck. Seriously, Mama, don't break. We have enough problems, I used to say to her.
Soon after, Ella had another asthma attack. Rosamund said that it started out just like a normal night. Ella was listening to music, Skyfall by Adele. She was kind of obsessed with that song.
And I remember that night, she was in the playroom on the computer playing Skyfall again and again. And I remember, because it was Valentine's Day, and I'd gone and bought food I was cooking, I was like, look, you need to go and have a shower and be ready to come and eat, because we needed to eat by a certain time. You know, we had school the following day. And I remember, so my kids will say to you, oh, Mum shouted at her the night before she... I was like, look, I know what happened wasn't meant to happen, but we need to eat, and I've cooked. And there she is on there. And I remember being so upset when Adele won the Oscar that Ella wasn't alive to see it.
Ella had a coughing fit that led to a seizure and then a heart attack. She died in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. on February 15th, 2013. In the UK, when someone dies of unknown causes, a coroner is called in to do the assessment. In 2014, the coroner declared that Ella died as a combination of acute respiratory failure and severe asthma. But still, none of this made sense to Rosamund. And she still wanted to understand what had triggered the attacks. What killed Ella?
It was important to know why she died. She has siblings, and I knew as they got older, you know, what was I going to say? She got asthma, why, how? I had no answers.
The coroner's report was mostly useless to Rosamund. Except there was this one thing. A clue.
Her trigger was to do with something in the air. It didn't specifically state what it was. And that gave me some hope. I thought, at least this is a bit further than we've got before.
To push it even further, she started doing a bunch of media interviews.
To say, look, this is what's happened to my daughter. If anyone's got any ideas out there, if they can help me get to the bottom of this mysterious thing, can they let me know? And that is how the ball began to roll.
People got in touch from all over the country, throwing out all kinds of ideas for what might have happened here. And this eventually led her to Stephen Holgate, a professor at the University of Southampton who specializes in asthma and allergies. One day in 2016, he was on the train, heading home from London.
On the long journey back, he picked up the Standard and he was reading it.
I had to pick up the Evening Standard, and I saw Rosamund kissing Deborah. I mean, it was just a dreadfully sad story.
Stephen had spent his entire career researching asthma, getting to know the lungs inside and out. And here was his life's work sitting in front of him, in the form of a medical mystery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a doctor, you know, and there was clearly an opportunity to try and unravel what had happened. And I know Rosamund couldn't do that. None of the doctors in all these hospitals could do it either. But because I had spent, you know, my life researching asthma, you know, I knew a lot about the disease.
He got in touch with Rosamund and said, "Would you mind if I look through your daughter's medical records?" And she was like, "Yes, go for it." Handed them over, and Stephen dove in.
Mounds and mounds of boxes of hospital notes and GP records and all the rest.
Stephen also went to the hospital where sections of Ella's lungs were being preserved. He pulled out these tiny lung scrapings that are about the size of a fingernail, put them under the microscope, and straight away, he saw something odd.
And what I saw in the sections was almost unbelievable, really.
The lining of her lungs, which should protect them from gunk in the air, had been totally destroyed.
It's as if you'd lost your skin and had kind of raw areas underneath.
In a healthy lung, you should see these lovely cells that look like columns with little hairs. But with Ella, those little columns had been replaced by a totally different cell, one that pumps out mucus. And this was mucking everything up.
This lining in large areas had peeled off and was rolled up into the airway itself, was coming away and was rolling up with mucus, very sticky, viscid mucus. So she had these large plugs of mucus that blocked her airways.
You are supposed to have some mucus in your lungs, and it's helpful. It captures gunk in the air and helps you to cough it out. But Ella's lungs had become a bit like a mucus factory. Stephen looked for signs of what might have been irritating lungs so much, like a bacterial or fungal infection. But nothing could explain this. But then a new clue emerged away from the lab. Something that clinched it for him.
We were, I suppose, I hate to use the term fortunate, Wendy, but I mean, in a way it was. It just so happened that there was a monitoring station for air pollution 1 mile from Ella's house.
An air pollution station. It was monitoring stuff like nitrogen dioxide, which gets spewed out by London traffic and can damage lung cells. Now, by this point, Rosamund already had a lawyer to help out with Ella's case, and so her legal team and Steve got to work. Here's what they did. They matched up the pollution levels for the days surrounding when Ella would have these really bad attacks. And bam.
We could see the local air pollution levels were astronomically high. Illegal levels of nitrogen dioxide.
Oh, gosh.
The team found a pattern. So Ella's attacks would come in these clusters, and mostly they hit when pollution levels were particularly high. Much higher than the World Health Organization sets for maximum safe levels of pollution, and higher than the UK government is supposed to allow. And in the days before Ella died, the pollution levels were bonkers in her neighborhood. Through his academic research, he had suspected that air pollution might have played a role here. But now, here was the evidence, and he was sure. Pollution had been triggering Ella's asthma attacks. It all made a lot of sense, because it turned out that Ella's family lived near one of the busiest roads in London. So all of Ella's life, she'd been breathing in lots of car exhaust and other pollution. When Rosamund found out about all this, she was shocked.
Like, what, the air is what's killing her. What I now know is every day she was going out on her bike, she was really active. She was breathing in the air around, even in the garden. It's kind of a bit hard because the pollution is invisible. You can't see it with the naked eye.
We're still not sure why Ella's asthma was so deadly. Like, one of her siblings has asthma, but it's not nearly as bad. Stephen thinks it's perhaps some very unlucky genetic predisposition. But what Stephen did know was that every time little Ella breathed in all that pollution, it kept irritating her lungs. More, until it destroyed them. Rosamund started researching about pollution, and she realized that in the UK and the US, pollution levels tend to be higher in black and brown communities. And that's partly because the government and industry have gotten away with building things like highways through black and brown neighborhoods. And the thing is, the neighborhood where Rosamund lives, it has a pretty large black population. Rosamund herself is black.
If we didn't live, I think that's what blows my mind. If we probably didn't live in this house near this road, then maybe my daughter will still be alive. So it is as simple as that. I.e., if we live somewhere else, then this might not have happened.
Ella's doctors know asthma. There'd been heaps of studies, even at the time, showing that air pollution could make asthma worse. But despite that, it just wasn't on the radar of some of the best doctors in London. How is that possible? That answer is coming up just after the break. Welcome back. We just heard that pollution was a major trigger for Ella's asthma. But until Stephen and the team came along, none of her doctors had even suggested it as a possibility. So why is that? Well, some researchers told us that it could be because these days, you often can't see the pollution around us. It's a little out of sight, out of mind. And that is not how it used to be. In fact, London used to burn so much coal that the air turned this gross, pukey colour. When that happened, it was known as a pea super. So, time for a bit of history, and then we'll get back to Rosamund's story. One of the worst events where smog took over London was known, appropriately, as the Great Smog of London. If you're a fan of The Crown, you know what I'm talking about. It happened in December 1952. Here's a BBC doco about it.
This was smog on the grand scale. There'd never been anything like it before. The sky and the light were blotted out, and London coughed and crawled almost to a standstill in murky yellow gloom.
The smog stuck around for 5 days and ended up killing thousands of people.
And while people coughed and choked, the smog got thicker and darker. And nobody could do anything about it.
But they could do something about it. And they did. Events like this kicked governments in the butt to get rid of the smog. In places like the UK and the US, where similar events happened, they started passing Clean Air Acts to cap how much gunk power plants, homes, and cars could spew into the air. And these laws, they made a big difference. Car exhaust is safer than it used to be, and many power plants now have booby whackers on them, like scrubbers, to keep some of the pollution out of the air. So yeah, for London, no more pea supers. But over the years, scientists have come to realize that the invisible stuff that is still getting pumped into our air, it can do some dangerous things to our health. One researcher told me it scares the shit out of her. This pollution can break down into teeny tiny pieces about the same size as bacteria. They float in the air, and when you breathe them in, they're so small that they can just sneak inside us. Here's Stephen again.
We know that these pollutants can penetrate the lung and pass through into the bloodstream and circulate to all parts of the body now.
Really all parts of the body?
Yeah. Brain, the heart, the pancreas.
And Stephen says air pollution is now being linked to all sorts of diseases.
Coronary heart disease, dementia, diabetes, it accelerates blindness.
Blindness?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's thought that tiny bits of pollution can mess with our retina, increasing our risk of eye disease. And some of these bits of pollution are so small that they can actually cross the placenta, potentially affecting fetuses. They can even get into our brains. We're still working out exactly what all of this means, but some of the other effects of pollution are more clear. Like, besides fouling up our lungs, we've known for years that crap in the air increases our risk of getting heart disease. For example, a study of around 500,000 older folks found that those living near a highway or busy street were 30% more likely to die from coronary heart disease than those living further away. And that's why for years, places like the World Health Organization and the EPA had been lowering what a safe level of pollution is. Truth is that almost nowhere in the world actually meets those standards every day. And actually, this big report just came out last month from the American Lung Association, and it says that nearly 50% of US kids now live in a place with unhealthy levels of air pollution. So, even though it's really rare to get sick like Ella did from pollution, to Stephen, he sees what happened to her as an extreme example of what's happening to all of us.
Ella really was like the canary, in that she was able to sense the pollution and be a warning to others, and a warning to government, really, that something needs to be done about this.
And so, Rosamund hatched a plan. She wanted to get air pollution listed on Ella's death certificate. And if she could do that, it would be a world first. Rosamund wanted the real reason that Ella died to be official, but she also thought that perhaps Ella could put a face to all these awful statistics about what pollution is doing to us. Her lawyer also thought that it would open the door to more lawsuits for other people, to force governments around the world to clean our air.
So for me, as the journey was going on, the whole thing then got bigger and bigger. But I am very honest to say, in the beginning, it was definitely all about her.
For getting air pollution on a death certificate, it was going to be tricky. Rosamund had to go to a court to convince a coroner that there was a direct link between pollution and Ella's death. And even though we have statistics showing that pollution contributes to millions of deaths each year, it's actually really hard to point to a person and say air pollution killed them. But with Ella, the data was so damning. She was living under illegal levels of pollution. And so Rosamund thought she could do this.
There would have not been a point knowing all that research and failing in court. That wasn't going to help anything. So the most important thing still was to get that on her death certificate.
In late 2020, almost 8 years after Ella died, the second inquest into her death began. Stephen was an expert witness. Did you think you'd win? Was it like you thought this was a slam dunk?
I had no idea what would happen. What I did know was that I knew about asthma. I knew about Ella, because I'd spent the last 2.5 years poring over all this material.
And as Stephen remembers it, the government lawyers really put him to task.
My evidence was only about nearly 2 hours, but my God. They really tried to put me through the mincer. He kept saying, "You will agree," he pointed to some document. We had a bunch of documents about 2 feet high. And every time he said that, and I said, "No, I do not agree." And actually, that is wrong.
After all the evidence was presented, the coroner had to decide, did pollution kill Ella?
I remember the agonizing waits. It was really a stressful time.
In the first ruling of its kind, pollution from busy roads, the coroner found today, contributed to the 9-year-old's premature death.
Ella tragically made history when she became